Plymouth is a city on the south coast of Devon, England, about 37 miles southwest of Exeter and 190 miles west-southwest of London, between the mouths of the rivers Plym to the east and Tamar to the west, where they join Plymouth Sound to form the boundary with Cornwall. Plymouth's early history extends to the Bronze Age, when a first settlement emerged at Mountbatten. This settlement continued as a trading post for the Roman Empire, until it was surpassed by the more prosperous village of Sutton, now called Plymouth. In 1620, the Pilgrim Fathers departed Plymouth for the New World and established Plymouth Colony, the second English settlement in what is now the United States of America. During the English Civil War, the town was held by the parliamentarians and was besieged between 1642 and 1646. Throughout the Industrial Revolution, Plymouth grew as a commercial shipping port, handling imports and passengers from the Americas, and exporting local minerals, while the neighbouring town of Devonport became a strategic Royal Naval shipbuilding and dockyard town. In 1914, three neighbouring independent towns, viz., the County Borough of Plymouth, the County Borough of Devonport, and the urban district of East Stonehouse, were merged to form a single county borough. The combined town took the name of Plymouth, which, in 1928, achieved city status. The city's naval importance later led to its targeting and partial destruction during World War II, an act known as the Plymouth Blitz. After the war, the city centre was completely rebuilt, and subsequent expansion led to the incorporation of Plympton and Plymstock along with other outlying suburbs in 1967. The city is home to 261,546 people, making it the 30th most populous built-up area in the United Kingdom. It is governed locally by Plymouth City Council and is represented nationally by 3 MPs. Plymouth's economy remains strongly influenced by shipbuilding and seafaring, including ferry links to Brittany and Spain, but has tended toward a service-based economy since the 1990s. It has the largest operational naval base in Western Europe, HMNB Devonport, and is home to Plymouth University. History. Early history. Upper Paleolithic deposits, including bones of Homo sapiens, have been found in local caves, and artifacts dating from the Bronze Age to the Middle Iron Age have been found at Mountbatten, showing that it was one of the main trading ports of the country at that time. An unidentified settlement named Tamar is listed in Ptolemy's Geographia and is presumed to be located in the area of the modern city. The settlement of Plympton, further up the River Plym than the current Plymouth, was also an early trading port, but the river silted up in the early 11th century and forced the mariners and merchants to settle at the current-day Barbican near the river mouth. At the time, this village was called Sutton, meaning South Town in Old English. The name Plymouth, meaning mouth of the River Plym, was first mentioned in a pipe roll of 1211. The name Plymouth first officially replaced Sutton in a charter of King Henry VI in 1440. See Plympton for the derivation of the name Plym. Early defense and Renaissance. During the 100 Years' War, a French attack burned a manor house and took some prisoners, but failed to get into the town. In 1403, the town was burned by Breton raiders. In the late 15th century, a castle quadrata was constructed close to the area now known as the Barbican. It included 4 round towers, one at each corner, as featured on the city coat of arms. The castle served to protect Sutton Pool, which is where the fleet was based in Plymouth prior to the establishment of Plymouth Dockyard. In 1512, an Act of Parliament was passed for further fortifying Plymouth, and a series of fortifications were then built, including defensive walls at the entrance to Sutton Pool. Defences on St. Nicholas Island also date from this time, and a string of 6 artillery blockhouses were built, including one on Fish's Nose at the southeastern corner of the Hoe. This location was further strengthened by the building of a fort in 1596, which itself went on to provide the site for the citadel, established in the 1660s. During the 16th century, locally produced wool was the major export commodity. Plymouth was the home port for successful maritime traders, among them Sir John Hawkins, who led England's first foray into the Atlantic slave trade, as well as Sir Francis Drake, Mayor of Plymouth in 1581 and 1593. According to legend, Drake insisted on completing his game of bowls on the Hoe before engaging the Spanish Armada in 1588. In 1620 the Pilgrim Fathers set sail for the New World from Plymouth, establishing Plymouth Colony, the second English colony in what is now the United States of America. During the English Civil War, Plymouth sided with the Parliamentarians and was besieged for almost 4 years by the Royalists. The last major attack by the Royalists was by Sir Richard Grenville leading thousands of soldiers towards Plymouth, but they were defeated by the Plymouthians at Freedom Fields Park. The Civil War ended as a parliamentary win, but monarchy was restored by King Charles II in 1660, who imprisoned many of the parliamentary heroes on Drake's Island. Construction of the Royal Citadel began in 1665. After the Restoration, it was armed with cannon facing both out to sea and into the town, rumoured to be a reminder to residents not to oppose the Crown. Mountbatten Tower also dates from around this time. Plymouth Dock, naval power and Fowlston. Throughout the 17th century, Plymouth had gradually lost its preeminence as a trading port. By the mid-17th century, commodities manufactured elsewhere in England cost too much to transport to Plymouth, and the city had no means of processing sugar or tobacco imports. Although it did play a relatively small part in the Atlantic slave trade during the early 18th century. In the nearby parish of Stoke Damerel, the first dockyard, HMNB Devonport, opened in 1690 on the eastern bank of the River Tamar. Further docks were built here in 1727, 1762 and 1793. The settlement that developed here was called Dock, or Plymouth Dock, at the time, and a new town, separate from Plymouth, grew up. In 1712 there were 318 men employed, and by 1733 it had grown to a population of 3,000 people. Before the latter half of the 18th century, grain, timber and then coal were Plymouth's main imports. During this time the real source of wealth was from the neighbouring town of Plymouth Dock, and the major employer in the entire region was the dockyard. The three towns' conurbation of Plymouth, Stonehouse and Devonport enjoyed some prosperity during the late 18th and early 19th century, and were enriched by a series of neoclassical urban developments designed by London architect John Fowlston. Fowlston was important for both Devonport and Plymouth, and was responsible for several grand public buildings, many now destroyed, including the Athenaeum, the Theatre Royal and Royal Hotel, and much of Union Street. Local chemist William Cookworthy established his somewhat short-lived Plymouth porcelain venture in 1768 to exploit the recently discovered deposits of local china clay, an industry which continues to make up a portion of the city income. As an associate and host of engineer John Smeaton, he was indirectly involved with the development of the Eddystone Lighthouse. The 1-mile-long breakwater in Plymouth Sound was designed by John Rennie in order to protect the fleet moving in and out of Devonport. Work started in 1812. Numerous technical difficulties and repeated storm damage meant that it was not completed until 1841, 20 years after Rennie's death. In the 1860s, a ring of Palmerston forts was constructed around the outskirts of Devonport, to protect the dockyard from attack from any direction. Some of the greatest imports to Plymouth from the Americas and Europe during the latter half of the 19th century included maize, wheat, barley, sugar cane, guano, sodium nitrate and phosphate. Aside from the dockyard in the town of Devonport, industries in Plymouth such as the gasworks, the railways and tramways and a number of small chemical works had begun to develop in the 19th century, continuing into the 20th century. Plan for Plymouth 1943. During the First World War, Plymouth was the port of entry for many troops from around the Empire and also developed as a facility for the manufacture of munitions. Although major units of the Royal Navy moved to the safety of Scapa Flow, Devonport was an important base for escort vessels and repairs. Flying boats operated from Mountbatten. In the First World War, Devonport was the headquarters of Western Approaches Command until 1941, and Sunderland flying boats were operated by the Royal Australian Air Force. It was an important embarkation point for U.S. troops for D-Day. The city was heavily bombed by the Luftwaffe, in a series of 59 raids known as the Plymouth Blitz. Although the dockyards were the principal targets, much of the city centre and over 3,700 houses were completely destroyed and more than 1,000 civilians lost their lives. This was largely due to Plymouth's status as a major port. Charles Church was hit by incendiary bombs and partially destroyed in 1941 during the Blitz, but has not been demolished, as it is now an official permanent monument to the bombing of Plymouth during World War II. The redevelopment of the city was planned by Sir Patrick Abercrombie in his 1943 plan for Plymouth, whilst simultaneously working on the reconstruction plan for London. Between 1951 and 1957, over 1,000 homes were completed every year, mostly using innovative prefabricated systems of just three main types. By 1964, over 20,000 new homes had been built, transforming the dense, overcrowded and unsanitary slums of the pre-war city into a low-density, dispersed suburbia. Most of the city centre shops had been destroyed, and those that remained were cleared to enable a zoned reconstruction according to his plan. In 1962, the modernist high-rise of the Civic Centre was constructed, an architecturally significant example of mid-20th century civic slab and tower set-piece allowed to fall into disrepair by its owner, Plymouth City Council, but recently Grade 2 listed by English Heritage to prevent its demolition. Post-war, Devonport Dockyard was kept busy refitting aircraft carriers such as the Ark Royal and, later, nuclear submarines, while new light industrial factories were constructed in the newly zoned industrial sector, attracting rapid growth of the urban population. The army had substantially left the city by 1971, with barracks pulled down in the 1960s. However, the city remains home to the 42 Commando of the Royal Marines. Government. Local government history. The first record of the existence of a settlement at Plymouth was in the Domesday Book in 1086 as Sudetone, Saxon for South Farm, located at the present-day Barbican. From Saxon times, it was in the hundred of Roborough. In 1254 it gained status as a town, and in 1439, became the first town in England to be granted a charter by Parliament. Between 1439 and 1934, Plymouth had a mayor. In 1914, the county boroughs of Plymouth and Devonport, and the urban district of East Stonehouse merged to form a single county borough of Plymouth. Collectively they were referred to as the Three Towns. In 1919, Nancy Astor was elected the first ever female Member of Parliament to take office in the British Houses of Parliament for the constituency of Plymouth Sutton. Taking over office from her husband Waldorf Astor, Lady Astor was a vibrantly active campaigner for her resident constituents. Plymouth was granted city status on the 18th of October 1928. The city's first Lord Mayor was appointed in 1935, and its boundaries further expanded in 1967 to include the town of Plympton and the parish of Plymstock. In 1945, Plymouth-born Michael Foot was elected Labour MP for the war-torn constituency of Plymouth Devonport, and after serving as Secretary of State for Education and responsible for the 1974 Health and Safety at Work Act, went on to become one of the most distinguished leaders of the Labour Party. The 1971 local government white paper proposed abolishing county boroughs, which would have left Plymouth, a town of 250,000 people, being administered from a council based at the smaller Exeter, on the other side of the county. This led to Plymouth lobbying for the creation of a Tamar-side county, to include Plymouth, Torpoint, Saltash, and the rural hinterland. The campaign was not successful, and Plymouth ceased to be a county borough on 1 April 1974 with responsibility for education, social services, highways and libraries transferred to Devon County Council. All powers returned when the city became a unitary authority on 1 April 1998 under recommendations of the Banham Commission. In the Parliament of the United Kingdom, Plymouth is represented by the three constituencies of Plymouth Moorview, Plymouth, Sutton and Devonport and South West Devon, and within the European Parliament as South West England. In the 2015 general election, all three constituencies returned Conservative MPs, who were Oliver Colville, Gary Streeter and Johnny Mercer for Moorview City Council. The City of Plymouth is divided into 20 wards, 17 of which elect 3 councillors and the other 3 electing 2 councillors, making up a total council of 57. Each year a third of the council is up for election for 3 consecutive years. There are no elections on the following 4th year, which is when county council elections take place. The total electorate for Plymouth was 188,924 in April 2015. The local election of 7 May 2015 resulted in a political composition of 28 Labour councillors, 26 Conservative and 3 UKIP, resulting in a Labour administration. Plymouth was granted the dignity of Lord Mayor by King George V in 1935. The position is elected each year by a group of 6 councillors. It is traditional that the position of the Lord Mayor alternates between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party annually, and that the Lord Mayor chooses the Deputy Lord Mayor. Conservative councillor Dr. John Mahoney is the incumbent for 2015-16. The Lord Mayor's official residence is 3 Elliot Terrace, located on the Hoe, once a home of Waldorf and Nancy Astor. It was given by Lady Astor to the City of Plymouth as an official residence for future Lord Mayors, and is also used today for civic hospitality, as lodgings for visiting dignitaries and High Court judges, and it is also available to hire for private events. The Civic Centre Municipal Office Building in Armada Way became a listed building in June 2007 because of its quality and period features, but has become the centre of a controversy as the council planned for its demolition, estimating that it could cost £40 million to refurbish it, resulting in possible job losses.